The desert sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, baking the concrete of the elite training range. Dust motes danced in the harsh, unforgiving light. And there, in the center of it all, stood a woman they thought was nothing. A woman they dismissed as a clerical error, a child playing soldier. Colonel Davies's sneering command, "Don't touch my AR, little girl. Go back to the simulators where you can't hurt anyone," still hung in the air, thick with condescension, met only by a ripple of nervous, uncomfortable chuckles from the hardened men around her. They were operators, marksmen, warriors forged in fire. And she? She was an anomaly, a silent statue in standard fatigues, her hair pulled back, her hands resting perfectly still at her sides. They saw weakness. They saw an easy target for their commander's booming, self-important wrath. What they didn't see, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was the coiled, lethal potential humming beneath that placid surface. They didn't see the ghost of Kandahar, and in under 10 seconds, their world and Colonel Davies's career would be shattered into a million glittering pieces of spent brass. This is not just a story about a shooting drill. This is an epic saga of silent strength, of dignity forged in the crucible of unimaginable hell, of a warrior's spirit that refuses to be diminished by the loud, ignorant bluster of those who mistake rank for righteousness. This is a 7,000-word journey into the heart of true valor, where the most devastating weapon is not the M4 carbine, but the unshakable calm of a master sergeant who had seen the face of death and walked away, not with bravado, but with a quiet, terrifying competence. Prepare to have your emotions wrung dry by the injustice, by the breathtaking skill, by the crushing weight of humiliation, and finally, by the redemptive power of true leadership. This is the legend of Master Sergeant Eva Rostova. The air on Range 4 crackled, not with electricity, but with the toxic fumes of unchecked ego. Colonel Richard Davies, his Silver Eagle insignia gleaming like a challenge, stood with his chest puffed out, a monument to his own perceived superiority. His shadow fell over the woman, a deliberate act of dominance, as he picked up the M4 carbine she had been preparing to use. He held it one-handed, a casual, arrogant display meant to underscore his belief in her fragility. "This," he announced, his voice echoing across the range, not to the assembled shooters, but directly at her, "is a finely tuned instrument of war, not a toy. The recoil alone would probably knock you on your back." The assembled soldiers, men who had faced real bullets and real blood, shifted uncomfortably. They knew this was wrong. They knew the colonel was crossing a line, painting a target on someone who hadn't even spoken. But he was a colonel. The weight of his rank, the fear of his retribution, was a physical force, silencing any potential ally. Their nervous chuckles from moments before had curdled into a thick, suffocating silence. It was the silence of complicity, of men who knew better but chose the safety of inaction. Yet, the woman, Eva Rostova, did not flinch. Not a muscle twitched. Her gaze, calm and unblinking, remained fixed on the rifle, now held hostage in the colonel's meaty hand. Her breathing was slow, deep, and even, a metronome of absolute control. While Davies performed his pathetic one-man show for an audience of terrified subordinates, Rostova was engaged in a sacred, silent ritual. In her mind, she was running through a mental checklist honed over thousands of hours in places where the sun didn't shine, and mercy was a forgotten word. Her stillness was not submission. It was the terrifying quiet before a hurricane makes landfall. It was the coiled spring of a predator, waiting for the perfect, inevitable moment to strike. High above, shielded behind polarized glass in the observation tower, General Marcus Thorne watched. He was a man whose face was a roadmap of classified wars, whose eyes missed nothing. He didn't see an anomaly or a mistake. He saw the subtle, perfect weight distribution in her stance, the absolute lack of fidgeting, the quiet, analytical observation in her eyes. He saw the calm at the center of the storm. He saw a warrior. The colonel, mistaking her profound silence for weakness, doubled down. "This is the Tier 1 qualification course," he boomed, spittle flying. "This isn't for support staff or personnel clerks who want to play soldier for a day. This is for warriors. It requires discipline, strength, and an intimate understanding of the platform." He placed the rifle back on the bench, but kept his hand possessively on the handguard, a final physical barrier. "Stand down," he commanded, his voice dripping with finality. That's an order. His order, however, was a death rattle. It was drowned out by the piercing electronic shriek of the range control system. Shooters, prepare for course. Judgment. 10 hostile targets mixed with 5 non-hostile friendlies. Variable distance 25 to 300 meters. Time limit 10 seconds from initial tone. A collective gasp went through the line. The judgment course. It was the stuff of nightmares. A brutal, unforgiving test designed to break even the best. Hitting all 10 hostiles was a feat. Doing it in 10 seconds without touching a single friendly. That was the realm of myth. The mark of a god among soldiers. Colonel Davies let out a short, cruel laugh, turning to Rostova. 10 seconds? You'll be lucky to get the safety off in 10 seconds. He never saw it coming. The world didn't just slow down, it stopped. The ambient noise, the wind, the distant chatter, the colonel's fading laughter, vanished, replaced by a deafening, crystalline silence. For Eva Rostova, the tone wasn't a starting pistol. It was a key, unlocking a vault of pure, lethal efficiency. Her left hand shot out, not in anger, but with the precision of a surgeon. It wasn't a punch, it was a masterclass in biomechanics. Her fingers found the colonel's wrist and applied a subtle, devastating leverage. It was a redirection, using his own weight and momentum against him. His grip on the rifle vanished, as if it had never been there. He stumbled backward, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His carefully constructed world of authority crumbling in less than a heartbeat. In the same fluid, breathtaking motion, her hands claimed the rifle. It didn't clatter or fumble. It flew into her grasp as if summoned. The stock settled into the pocket of her shoulder with a familiar, comforting thump. Her cheek welded to the stock, her eye found the optic, and the safety clicked off with a sound as sharp and final as a guillotine blade. And then she moved. What happened next was not shooting. It was poetry written in lead and fire. It was a symphony of controlled, devastating violence. Crack, 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 crack 10 rounds. 10 perfect lethal strikes, all in under 3 seconds. The rifle in her hands was an extension of her will. It barely moved, anchored by a stance as immovable as bedrock. 10 glittering brass casings arced through the air, catching the desert sun like falling stars, before tinkling onto the concrete in a delicate, deadly rain. Then, silence, a silence so profound, so heavy, it pressed down on everyone like a physical weight. The only sound was the faint metallic ping of the last casing settling. Downrange, 10 steel targets, the hostiles, lay flat on the ground, each bearing a single, perfectly centered hole. The 5 friendly targets stood untouched, pristine, mocking monuments to her impossible control. The crowd was frozen. Jaws hung slack. Eyes were wide with disbelief. Colonel Davies stood a few feet away, his arms still tingling, his face ashen, his entire identity reduced to dust. "That's not possible," he whispered, the words a ghost of his former booming command. The silence was broken by the heavy, rhythmic clang, clang, clang of boots on metal stairs. General Marcus Thorne descended from the observation tower, his presence alone parting the sea of stunned soldiers. He walked with the quiet, deliberate authority of a man who had stared into the abyss and commanded it to blink. He didn't even glance at the paralyzed colonel. His entire focus was on the woman who was now calmly, methodically clearing her weapon. She ejected the magazine with a smooth snick. She locked the bolt to the rear. She visually inspected the chamber, her movements economical, certain, and utterly devoid of the adrenaline that should have been coursing through her veins. She was performing a post-fire check with the same detached professionalism she had shown before the world had exploded. The general stopped before her. The entire range held its breath. He didn't speak to her. Instead, he turned to his aide, his voice calm but carrying the weight of mountains. "Major, pull up the service record for the shooter on lane 4. Display it on the main instructional monitor, now." The order was final. A wave of electric anticipation swept through the crowd. The mystery was about to be solved, and the air crackled with the feeling of impending doom for someone. Rostova finished her safety check, placed the cleared rifle back on the bench, and stood at ease, her gaze fixed forward, as if she existed in a world only she and the general inhabited. The giant digital screen flickered to life. A stark personnel file appeared. White text on a black background. The silence was so absolute that the hum of the monitor sounded like a roar. Then, the data scrolled, and the collective gasp that ripped through the onlookers was a physical force. Name: Master Sergeant Eva Rostovaunit. First, Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, Delta Force. The fabled Tier 1 unit, the tip of the spear, the unit that didn't exist. Moss, 18Z, Special Forces, Senior Sergeant. The highest enlisted leadership role in the Green Berets. Awards: Distinguished Service Cross, the military's second highest award for valor, just below the Medal of Honor. Silver Star with 3 oak leaf clusters, 4 separate acts of extreme gallantry. Bronze Star with V, device for valor and 5 oak leaf clusters, 6 separate acts of heroism in combat. Qualifications: Master Instructor, all US and foreign small arms advanced breacher, halo jump, master combat, diver combat deployments, 6 all classified, and then the final chilling line, a note from a previous commanding officer. Operational nickname: the Ghost of Kandahar. The weight of the revelation crushed the air from the range. The ignorance, the arrogance, the dismissive chuckles, all of it was incinerated in the white-hot light of her service record. This wasn't a little girl. This was a legend, a ghost who had walked through fire and emerged not just unscathed, but as a force of nature. General Thorne let the information hang in the air, letting the full, devastating weight of their collective stupidity settle upon them. Then, he turned to face Master Sergeant Rostova. He drew himself up to his full height. His posture shifted from that of an observer to that of a senior officer, formally recognizing a peer, a warrior whose deeds eclipsed his own rank. He executed a sharp, perfect salute, his hand slicing through the air with reverence. "Master Sergeant Rostova," he said, his voice ringing with a deep, profound respect that vibrated in every man's chest. "My apologies for the unprofessional conduct of my subordinate. It is an honor to have you on my range." He held his salute until Rostova returned it with a crisp, economical motion, her face still a mask of professional calm. Then, the general turned. His gaze, when it fell upon Colonel Davies, was colder than the void of space, harder than flint. The air itself seemed to freeze. "Colonel," Thorne's voice was a low, dangerous growl that promised annihilation. "You are a disgrace. You wear the uniform of a leader, yet you embody the worst kind of ignorance and arrogance." Davies's face had gone from pale to the color of wet ash. He looked like a man watching his life, his career, his very soul, burn to the ground. "You did not see a Master Sergeant of the United States Army Special Forces. You saw a little girl. You assumed weakness where there is unparalleled world-class strength. You demanded respect for your rank while showing none for the quiet professional standing before you." The general took a step forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow even more terrifying. "Let me be clear. Master Sergeant Rostova's service record contains more valor, more sacrifice, more real warrior spirit in a single line item than you have accumulated in your entire 25 years of service." He paused, letting the words sink their claws in. "You did not just disrespect a soldier, Colonel. You disrespected the very institution we serve. You disrespected the blood, sweat, and tears of every man and woman who has ever worn this uniform and faced the enemy. The condemnation was absolute. It was a public execution, delivered with the precision of a scalpel. You will report to my office at 1600 hours. You will be formally relieved of your command of this training facility, and you will spend the next month on remedial duty, personally cleaning every single weapon on this range." A final, devastating twist of the knife. "Perhaps," Thorne said, his voice dripping with icy contempt, "by handling the tools of our trade, you will finally learn to respect the hands that wield them." The story of Rostova's line didn't just spread. It exploded. It became wildfire, consuming the entire base by nightfall. It started with the stunned marksmen on Range 4, their hushed, awestruck retellings painting a picture of divine retribution. By evening chow, it was the only topic in every mess hall, every barracks, every smoke pit. They didn't just talk about the shooting. They talked about the details that turned it into legend. They talked about how she had effortlessly, almost gently, neutralized a full-bird colonel's physical advance, as if swatting away a fly. They talked about the sound of those 10 shots, so impossibly fast they hadn't been 10 cracks, but one long, terrifying reap in the fabric of reality. They talked about the look on Davies's face when her file appeared. It was a masterpiece of shattered arrogance, a portrait of a man realizing he was not just wrong, but cosmically, humiliatingly insignificant. The name Ghost of Kandahar was no longer just a call sign whispered in classified briefings. It was a title, a legend made flesh. It was spoken with a reverence usually reserved for saints and war heroes long dead. True to the general's word, Colonel Davies was relieved of command. The next morning, he was seen alone on the range, not barking orders, but silently, methodically, disassembling and cleaning M4 carbines. His movements were slow, deliberate, stripped of all his former bluster. There was no anger, only a profound, soul-crushing humility. He was a broken man, yes, but in that breaking, a lesson was being painfully, beautifully forged. The incident became the ultimate cautionary tale. It was told to every new officer, every loudmouth who thought his rank was a shield. It was a stark, unforgettable reminder. In the world of true professionals, assumptions are a liability that can get you killed. Or, in Davies's case, professionally annihilated. The quiet ones, the unassuming ones, the ones you overlook, they are often the most dangerous. A week later, something truly remarkable happened. Colonel Davies, having completed his daily penance, sought out Master Sergeant Rostova. He found her not in an office, but on a small pistol range, patiently instructing a group of young, wide-eyed recruits. Her voice was calm, her guidance precise, her movements economical and flawless. He waited, standing at a respectful distance, until she was finished. When she turned to acknowledge him, there was no defiance in her eyes, only quiet professionalism. He didn't offer a clipped, forced apology. His voice was strained, his posture bent with genuine humility. "Master Sergeant," he began, swallowing hard. "What I did was inexcusable. I have no excuse. I was arrogant, and I was wrong." He paused, gathering himself. "I've been watching you train these kids. The way you teach, the economy of it. I've never seen anything like it." He took a deep breath. "I am formally asking you, would you be willing to help me redesign the marksmanship curriculum for this entire base? I want them to learn from you. I want them to learn what a real warrior looks like." Rostova looked at him. There was no gloating, no "I told you so," no trace of the anger she was surely entitled to feel. She saw not the arrogant colonel from a week ago, but a man who had been stripped bare, who was trying, with trembling hands, to rebuild himself on a foundation of respect and truth. Her reply was simple, devoid of any emotion but pure unwavering professionalism. "Yes, Colonel." And with those two words, a new chapter began. The firing line where she had put 10 rounds into 10 targets in under 3 seconds was unofficially, unanimously nicknamed Rostova's line. A small, hand-painted sign appeared on the lane marker, placed there by an anonymous soldier who understood the weight of what had happened. It became a landmark, a shrine, a physical daily reminder that true competence will always, always silence arrogance. A year passed. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The rigid, outdated training doctrine that had defined the base was gone, replaced by a dynamic, fluid curriculum built on the principles Rostova had introduced: mental stillness, economy of motion, trigger press divorced from outcome. These were no longer abstract concepts discussed in manuals. They were the living, breathing core of every shooter who came through the program. Qualification scores didn't just improve, they soared, becoming the highest in the entire branch of service. New recruits, fresh-faced and nervous, were told the story of Rostova's line on their very first day. But it wasn't told as a funny anecdote or a piece of juicy gossip. It was presented as a foundational parable, a sacred text on the core values of their profession. They were taught that a warrior's worth is not measured in decibels, but in deeds. It is not defined by gender, by size, by the cut of their uniform, or the insignia on their collar. It is defined by a quiet, unshakable competence that reveals itself only when the stakes are highest, when the world is ending, and only you can stop it. The legend of the ghost of Kandahar became institutional folklore. It became the standard against which all others were measured. It was a powerful filter, weeding out the ego-driven and elevating those who understood that true service is silent, selfless, and utterly devastating when called upon. The culture of the entire base shifted. It became a place that revered the silent professional, the quiet expert, the person who let their actions, not their words, define them. The true legacy of that day on Range 4 was not the humbled colonel, or even the legendary shooting display. It was the standard. It was the ripple of change that grew and strengthened over time. Long after Master Sergeant Eva Rostova had quietly packed her gear and vanished into the shadows for her next classified assignment. She didn't need to give a speech. She didn't need to list her medals. Her actions, the calm, the precision, the undeniable, devastating competence under pressure, were her sermon. They taught a lesson more powerful than any lecture. True strength requires no announcement. It is calm, it is precise, it is undeniable. Years later, new instructors stand at Rostova's line. They point to a retired steel target mounted on a stand, its surface pockmarked with faint, overlapping bullet holes. A memorial. They tell the new generation, legacy isn't what you leave behind in a record book. It's the standard of excellence that lives on in the actions of those you inspire. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, a quiet, unassuming woman checks her equipment. Her movements are economical. Her mind is still. She is ready. Ready for the next moment when the world needs the ghost, and her competence will once again speak louder than any boast, any rank, any arrogant command. Was your heart pounding? Did you feel the injustice, the triumph, the raw power of silent competence? This is just one story from the shadows, where true heroes operate without fanfare. If you believe that respect is earned through deeds, not demanded by rank, if you're inspired by those who let their actions scream while they remain silent, if you crave more tales of quiet fury, unbreakable valor, and the warriors who redefine strength, and then subscribe to Beyond True Tales right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, so you never miss an epic 7,000-word saga where the quietest heroes make the loudest impact. Join our community of those who know that the most dangerous weapon is often the one you never see coming. Your next dose of heart-stopping, soul-stirring true valor is just one click away. Subscribe now and step beyond the true tales you thought you knew.